having a structured process to quantify customer value, and it's not as hard as people think. Even if you're not perfect at it, it's better than nothing.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the direct relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Todd Snelgrove, and here are 3 things you want to know about Todd before we start. He is the Senior Managing Partner of Experts in Value, and he's been running that for 7 years. He was the Director of Value Advisory at SAP, a title I find fascinating. And he spent 23 years at SKF, ending up as the Global VP of Value and Sales. Welcome, Todd.
Mark, good to see you.
It's going to be fun. How'd you get into pricing?
Kind of an indirect route, commercial background, and started realizing that we needed to work on value quantification. And then somehow a professor picked it up and wrote a business case, and they said, you found the holy grail. If you can quantify customer value, for us it was B2B marketplace, you found the best measurement to charge for it. And then from that, got to spend a lot of time with different people, learning outcome-based, performance-based, value-based pricing strategies.
So I have to say, in the last several years, I came at it from the opposite direction, and I love pricing ever since I've been young. But in the last several years, I've come to this realization that value is really what's driving everything. And trying to figure out how to quantify the value and understand the value is so important. So it's kind of interesting that we come at this from the opposite directions, probably with similar concepts. Mm-hmm. So let's ask some hard questions, if you don't mind. If I'm going to quantify value in a B2B setting, that's easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's relatively easy, as in I just have to figure out how much more profit this company is going to make. If I'm going to quantify value in a B2C setting, how do you do that?
Well, I see there's 2 things. The first thing I always say is, let's define what value is. And you just said it's making a company more profitable. I agree 100%. And you can start putting what are value placeholders on risk and relation, like some of these things. But the reason why I say that is some people, when you say value, at least from where I live in the States, value, you mean the lower price brand, the value brand at the store. That's not what I mean. So the word I got to check. And then there was this old measurement of total cost of ownership. But as you pointed out, I want to be more profitable. Cost is only one side of the equation. Maybe I could sell more or upgrade and all these things. So how do I make you more profitable? In the B2C world, Tesla has a I'm just trying to give you an example. The electric car company is saying, the initial purchase price, but you get these benefits, these. White goods. So I see a lot of it happening actually in the B2C marketplace now. Even airlines. I've got a great example of a legacy airline versus a low-priced airline. They might have low cost, but they use it as low price, trying to save. You look through all these different things. So more of the not impulse buys, but where you're going to spend a little bit of money, white goods maybe, cars, things like that. So you're seeing it play into the B2C side to some extent.
Yeah. So I'm going to say what I heard you say, and that is that as consumers, we sometimes make purchases where we're actually doing financial trade-offs, right? If I want to put solar on my house, how does that compare to my electric bill, right? If I want to buy an electric car, how does that compare to buying gas? If I want to buy a new appliance, how much energy do I save, right? And so these are real financial decisions that we make. But when I think about, what's the value of a shirt? It's just really hard, but yet a lot of the tools I use are the same. I just can't get to the quantification at the end.
Very much so. And to me, that's just a subconscious. When I'm looking at 2 widgets, shirts, and one's 25 and one's 35, I'm doing probably a subconscious based on experience, feelings, look, what day it is, what mood I'm in, did I get a bonus, whatever, all these things, and saying, is that one worth that price difference more? And it's a subjective feeling. I probably am not doing ROI analysis, but there's a famous story, we don't have time in it, but it's called the shed lock. You go to Home Depot, you got to buy a lock for your shed. Well, there's a $10 lock and a $30 lock. You're not doing it, but you're subconsciously saying, is it worth it to pay 3x more. What's in the shed? What's the probability? Did it, you're doing it very subconsciously. I mean, only some moron like me would sit there with a pen and paper and do a probability analysis, but that's
Right.
what makes that decision. And then you will choose based on that. So it's much more subconscious than ROI tools and things like that.
Okay. So you and I are 100% in agreement. Let's shift this to the B2B side now. And let's talk about the hard side of B2B. And that is I have a lot of friends who love behavioral economics, who love psychological pricing. And I push back a lot. Now, mind you, I know that it works. I know that it matters, but in B2B, it matters so much less.
That's funny because I'm going to try to make a long story short, but was sitting in a pricing class and the professor started talking about behavioral economics, consumer, and I honestly said, I don't have time for this. And then I listened and I went, oh my gosh, we do the things that actually confuse the customer. Let me give you one of my favorite examples that I come from an engineering technical, not me, but the companies that I work with. And it seems when they're doing an offer for a customer, they believe the more choices they give them, the better it is. And the deeper their spreadsheet is, the smarter they are. And they confuse the out of the customer. And then you get the procurement person that unbundles. If option C is this and option S this, the only difference is this, ergo you're charging. I mean, it's like, no, and don't do the two options. Because a lot of companies have said, here's my normal offering. Sales will say, customers only care about price. Let's make the cheap option. You get bleed as fast as you can believe, and we can go through examples of it, but two doesn't work. Procurement takes power. That's good enough, or I will cherry pick you. I'll buy the good version for the critical, but the 80-20 rule, 80% might be that's good enough. And the companies I work, we can't live on just selling good enough stuff. There's not enough margin there. So you better find a way to make the whole package worth the customer to pay the price difference, the investment.
Okay. So I will agree with you that there are some things in behavioral economics that matter a lot, right? So when we think about, do we build price lists that confuse our customers? Yes, right? That's stupid. We need to be able to simplify our price list, simplify our offerings, make it so that our buyers understand it. And so we can think of that in several different ways, paradox of choice, or just the complexity of too many choices, or not being able to configure my own solution to the problem. So these all make sense to me. But when I think of behavioral economics, I often think of things like the decoy effect, or, believe it or not, my dissertation was on 99 cents and why 99 cents works. And should I have a blue colored price tag or a red colored price tag? Yeah. Right. And these things matter in the consumer world, but they really don't matter in our world, in the B2B world. Would you agree with that or not?
The only comment there, and I've used decoy, if I'm correct here, where, I've got the full Monty offering, and then I've created a much higher price that excludes the world. We're going to do this, and this. And then I throw out a price and they go, I'm making up numbers. You want to know what your $1 million deal when you did this, and this was good enough? We don't need the I hate to say the fake $2 million one, that everything's included in. And there's a neat piece of research from a professor. He's now at, I'm going to say NCI, but it's called From Free to Fee. And the idea of taking things and saying, training's not free. I'm making this up. The 30-minute training where I come in and say, hi, is free. The 2-day training is not. Engineering design, it passes, it fails, free, 7-day turnaround. Engineering design within 2 days, the improvements and diagrams, not. So once you start doing that, you'll get I want that. And then you throw a huge price and they go, you want to know what? I'll take 7-day delivery. I'll keep cherry picking you, taking stuff for free as long as you're willing to give it to me. And when I bundle it all together, maybe my normal offering, it's worked with me actually with customers before, and maybe, again, being lucky sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that's not the decoy effect in behavioral economics is something different than that. I'm happy to tell you what it is in a second.
Sure. Yeah.
But what you described, I love, right? So I would think of that as good, better, best. And I always teach my clients to throw everything you possibly can into the best category, because it shows people here's what's possible someday. You're probably not going to buy it today, but you know that you can get to this point, or you know that we're good enough that we could offer this to you. And so it really does have a great impact in our sales to have a expensive best product in our product offering, right? So I'll agree with you completely. By the way, the decoy effect is let's use small, medium, and large popcorn at the movie theater.
Yep.
Right. And so the large popcorn is $8, the medium popcorn is $7.50, and the small popcorn is $3. Right? Which one are you going to buy?
Yeah.
You're going to buy the large because it's only 50 cents more than the medium.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. I'm confusing my high price. Okay. Yes. There you go.
Yeah. No worries. So these tricks, I don't feel like they work so well in the B2B world. But I wanted to, since you live that world too, I wanted to hear you pontificate on that.
And the only just extra comment there, it might depend who's making some of the buying decisions. If it's a very technical buy, the user's buying, procurement finance might act differently. I mean, this is where these trade-offs, like, how much am I paying for more of that? What's that? Could I buy that somewhere else? Could I insource it? They get probably much more financial, where the head of the line of business you're talking to might be a little bit more, for a little bit more, look how much more I get. And I'm not going to nickel and dime over this, that, and everything else. Again, it depends what your KPI is or how close you are to actually using what you're buying.
Yep. So I actually think these behavioral economics things have some role, but they're just not as powerful as they are in the B2C world. And we, as pricing people, as business people, really should be focused on value, right? How much more profit are we going to be making the customer if they buy our product? And I think that makes a huge difference for us. Let's take a moment and talk about procurement people, because I think you have had probably as many experiences as I have, or maybe many more. There's a difference in procurement when procurement has power and when they don't have power, right? So they often have power when they're buying a component that goes into something we're manufacturing, and they buy it over and over and over again. And they don't have power if we're buying a piece of capital equipment or big software investment and it's a one-time purchase. So talk to me about how we deal with procurement, how salespeople should deal with procurement in those two different situations.
Well, I think it's a great question. And what I've seen, though, is that the power of procurement in every industry is increased over time. So if it hasn't increased in a certain industry, it is increasing. And it's all it'll never happen here. Then I've had consulting clients call me back. I can't believe it. The nuclear subs are now being in charge. I'm using this as an example, but what you never thought it was going to be. My old world, big industrial capital equipment procurement. You're talking critical pieces of equipment. They have power now. No matter what, there's always they have part of the power. And I've got lucky to meet a bunch of procurement people, and I'm saying, here's how I buy. Here's what I do to unbundle you. Here's what you do incorrectly to give me value for free. I wouldn't call them tricks like, making you stay up late or keeping the office cold, like those things you laugh about sometimes. But I'm not here to promote my book, but it actually has 5 chapters from procurement people saying, what do I value and when will I pay for it? And I do a lot of work with this procurement guy, and he just tells me some funny stories of what salespeople do incorrectly. Let's give you one example. He says that it was my strategy of stupidity. So he used to buy engineering products. And the more he said to the suppliers, I don't care, that's not worth anything, the more they would come in and do free stuff for him to show him how smart they were. So I just never acknowledged it was valuable. They never bothered to pull it away. If they would have pulled it away, I would have said, wait a minute, you said you didn't value it, so it cost me to deliver it. He goes, no, they would just bring more people. They would give me more engineers for free because they figured eventually the more they showed the Superman cape of how smart they were, the more I would wake up one day. So it was just kind of, counterintuitive. He would also suggest being proactive. If you wait till the end and we're in the RFP process and then, the rules have been set, the weighting's been set, it's much tougher to go in and have a value conversation. And whenever you say the word value, they're going to think, that means you took somebody out for lunch or golfing. Like, to them, the word value becomes getting in there early and saying, I'm here to have a business conversation about making your company more profitable. I've engaged with the business, etc. So he goes, timing's a big deal. What you find is people try to hide from me. Nothing good happens if you wait to find me at the last minute. But engage, be proactive. And when you talk value, talk real dollars. It's okay to list benefits and all these other things. But when you say value, show how that's going to be more profitable. Do your research, have real numbers. One supplier came to him once, and it was something like their business case was going to help him save more than his total cost of the whole department. We're going to do all this great stuff, and we're going to reduce your costs. And they were doing all this math. And he goes, "You're telling me, I'm making up numbers, you're going to save me 100 million pounds? Yeah, the whole department isn't that. I don't believe you. And even if these were hard, I don't even spend that much to begin with. I mean, cash flow is valuable. We can talk the time value of money, but some people will say cash flow, I'm going to get you paid earlier. And they say it's free cash. He goes, no, it's not. I mean, make your business case hard and real, do some research, do some probability. And then I like it saying, no, we can even get into performance guarantees. Because, and that's what I've done a lot of my career with, is if you're able and willing to discount, maybe we should say no discount, but I'm willing to make sure you realize some value. And I'll put the people and processes in place. We just got to agree on what are we measuring, how are we going to measure it, and what the process is. I mean, I'm not going to decide after I do something if labor savings is of value. We need to know ahead of time. And then we're not going to argue, is it $20 an hour or $40 an hour? Rules of the card game probably should be decided before we play cards, is the analogy I always use.
Yeah, I think a performance guarantee makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories. This is before, this is when the last real job I had. So I was working with a company, and we were specifying a new pricing system. And by the way, it took me a long time to justify this. I went through tons of work inside the company, and honestly, I could tell you that the company was about to make $100 million a year in savings because of the fact that we stopped giving away money to customers. Right? Wow. So this was like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We had this committee. We chose the vendor. We take it to procurement. I had the pleasure of sitting in the very first meeting that procurement had with the vendor. And I am not joking. Procurement said to them, we're looking at two other vendors. Yours is the most expensive, and you need to lower your price if you expect us to do business. Yeah. I happen to know for a fact that was a lie.
Yeah, I imagine that.
Right? and so that one experience has informed my way of thinking about procurement a lot. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's why I say when they don't have power, because I knew he had no power.
Mm-hmm. You created power.
But he certainly pretended to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we need to be able to walk away and justify our price and say, and my old CEO would say, when it gets to the point of bad business is bad business. But if you don't walk away, and the procurement people know that, they're just going to keep pushing it. I might as well keep asking for more free stuff, whether that's price or free implementation, whatever it is. If you're going to give it to me. And just one quote that I think sums up, it's one of my favorite quotes from my old CEO. How many ways do you think our sales team has to discount? And we both started laughing. I bet there's probably 400. There's the day of the week. There's the size of the order. There's the end of the year buy. There's a competitive. I mean, we've all heard them. How many ways have I said to them, don't discount, but we'll guarantee value? That's the problem. So if your company is able to give a 10% discount if the customer buys, why don't you say, I want 10% guaranteed value? If I don't deliver it, I will give you a rebate, penalty, whatever, check. And I spent a lot of my time getting procurement to realize that 10% value per year is better than a 10% price cut. Because the 10% price cut's held for the 5 years of the contract. I'm going to find 10% value every year. Energy, lubrication, inventory, production increase, whatever that is. It turns out that my 10% is better. And it's actually helping you get what you want. You're just hoping that the price cut becomes a savings. But if you don't have a tool or a process, you're just, talking about value on a PowerPoint slide. We all can.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand what you just said. Did you just say we're going to give you a performance guarantee, and if we don't hit that guarantee, then we'll give you the 10% discount?
Correct, 100%. I signed about 180 of those. And there's a few takeaways after that is, one is we got paid up front. It wasn't, there would be a bonus because customers have a tough time finding money for bonuses at the end of the year. I can't find an extra, we'll make $1 million. I'd be fired if I paid you more. Now we're both on the hook. And then we just had to agree. Labor doesn't count, or $20 is too high. I mean, sometimes you get the accountants that want to get to the seventh decimal. It's more important to choose a number that's reasonable because it's the delta you're working off of between the two. And to go, and it really, you're not doing this for every client. You're doing it for your bigger ones, strategic accounts, key accounts where you're engaged in. But once you get that ongoing annual process of having improvement programs, continuous improvement, Six Sigma, whatever it is in your world, procurement people are measured on annual, productivity improvements usually. They'll revert to price if they can't find a way. So you're like, okay, look, you save money here. As long as they could have a hard number, they were usually on board with it.
That's a great idea. I like that. You said these words that just got me to smile or maybe perk up a little bit. You said the words value conversation. So tell me what you mean when you say those words.
But the usual discussion was, first of all, somebody knowing the customer / industry. So we would have teams that are experts in, finance or life insurance or industrial, whatever it is. Because again, how do you frame it? What's important to them? And I'll tell you a funny story, the exact opposite afterwards, because it still makes me smile. Knowing that and then customizing our presentation. And it was usually a dual fold strategy to say, okay, here's what we think we're hearing from your team. Then I would spend time, believe it or not, explaining here's what we think of value. So not this total cost of ownership. I've got this term called total profit added, but we're going to help you on the acquisition, the operation, the maintenance, and the disposal phase. Here are the 400 drivers we have. Here's where we've done it before. Here's the opportunities we think with you talking to your smart people. Here's the program we'd like to have in place. And then kind of getting into that type of a discussion of where, when, what, why, and how, versus showing up with a generic corporate, here's where my head office is. I've been here for 100 years and I'm really big. And then terminology being not relevant to them or anything. So you or the value pricing person can't be an expert in every industry. But having at least that person there. I was talking to railroads. I've been on a railroad, but how that industry operates, who pays who, the government involved. You better have somebody that knows a little bit about the industry for the credibility aspect. If you're trying to get the customer to get away from 3 bids and a buy, it's comfortable, it's easy, I have a process. They better look at both the people in the room and say, that person knows our industry, can tell me some relevant stories, and this person can measure and understand value.
Nice. I often think of a value conversation as asking the questions instead of presenting the answers.
And there's the challenger style, there's the spin selling. So it's having both of those types of things, because what I find with the value side of it depends who you're talking to. And these, again, I probably got pulled in way too much with procurement because it was the closing. The customer loves us, they want us, but they want to pay us less. Hey, Todd, get in an airplane and so that was maybe why mine is. But half the time the customers don't know their numbers. Again, from my world, they don't know what best in class is. So it's funny, this procurement gentleman asked me once, he goes, what's the average life of pumps within your company? I smiled. I wouldn't know that. Well, when you ask me those questions, how do you think I would know that? Your job is to know your product or service inside and out. And there's this lady that used to run procurement for, I think it was AstraZeneca, and became the head of the Chartered Institute of Procurement. She goes, if you can't demonstrate to me value using my numbers in my language, don't expect me to figure out what your value is. I can't. I buy all this every day. So if we've both been around a long time, but 100 years ago, there was, Mr. Customer, what keeps you up at night? What are your problems? And it turns out problems are relative, and I don't have time for the story, but if you're used to getting 3 years out of your pumps and now you get 3.5 years, you're like, I'm doing great. Until you say, guess what? The oil and chemical guys are getting 13 years out of the same pump, and that's worth $3 million a year in parts. Well, wait a minute. A pump's how? Okay, so that's a little bit of the telling versus the asking, but asking is great, but better have something there to then keep the conversation going. If not, they go, I don't know, or we hit our target. Where'd the target come from?
Yep.
It was last year plus 5% or whatever.
Yep. No, I agree completely. It's got to be a conversation and not just an interview.
Yes.
And I also could see if I'm dealing with procurement, which, by the way, I almost never deal with procurement anymore. If I'm dealing with procurement, I could see how it's all a tell, right? Because they don't need to know. They don't know the value of what it is the company's buying.
Well, and they don't use it. I mean, the joke is I'm sitting in an office in downtown Toronto. What's the value? Well, the person that's doing the sales or marketing or pricing, this is easier for me to use. I'm getting more benefit out of it. I'm faster to I mean, that's your benefit. That's not what I measured on. I mean, until I have pain, I don't know what pain is until you
Yep.
live it yourself. So
Yep.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and again, always go to the people that are the line of business, the people that are going to be using what you're trying to offer, and get that buy-in. So I'm saying we need both of that.
Yep.
If not, we end up with these. I've got the order. How many times have we got the order? Then somehow it gets to this procurement committee, and we're stuck there for a year, and nothing happens. So
Yeah. Todd, this is fascinating. We're going to have to start wrapping it up. Let me ask the final question.
Sure.
What is one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
I think having a structured process to quantify customer value, and it's not as hard as people think. I mean, it really just, even if you're not perfect at it, it's better than nothing, because if you put out a number back to the conversation, that's high, that's low, it's a discussion now. But, saying it's going to be just better, better, and we think that's worth this, then the price difference you're charging becomes an investment. And then we can talk about what's the probability, what's the payback, where have you done it before, will you put it at risk? Those are all great closing conversations, but value quantification, in my opinion, is at, I wouldn't call it the heart. It's foundational. It's like so many things are with pricing, but just assuming the customer is going to, or the customer client is going to figure out what your value is probably not a long-term strategy. And if you can't quantify it, they're just going to try to take it for free.
It shocks me that so few people do this. So few companies quantify that value.
More and more starting to do it. The issue I see is that they're trying to, it's a little bit of everybody trying to do something instead of having a structured process, tool, research, etc. to do it. So somebody launches a new product and they go off and they create a spreadsheet. Then somebody else does something else somewhere. Then, the companies that have done well, and I think there's 12 companies in the vote. I'm not here to push the vote, but I mean, they've actually got a structured team, and they mean we're going to have a committee even that says, okay, let's tie this together. And, whether they report into marketing because it's pricing marketing or is it a sales? I mean, yeah, I've always been in kind of the group because it floats across all these different functions.
Yep. Okay. Do us a favor and push the book. What's the title of it? I didn't even know you had a book. I didn't see it on your LinkedIn page.
Like real quickly, and it's not here to sell books, but I can't even do this. Value first, then price. Point being, price becomes an issue, but only after you've discussed value. If I say $100 and then I start talking about $100, I don't know $100. This should be, I'm making them. This should be worth $300. $100, okay. And then it's building value-based pricing strategies. But the first one, the subtitle was, understanding and buying value from a sales and procurement perspective. And what I like, again, there's procurement people saying, here's what salespeople do wrong, and here's what sales best practices. People are saying, here's what we do right. So nice. the one thing in there is just trying to have a structured methodology of quantifying value. And if a customer says total cost of ownership, that's great. Then you should be able to follow up and say, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of times customers are talking about landed cost. And I used to say when I had flexibility in my email signature, I could be the highest price, but the lowest cost. So procurement people would laugh and they would say, Todd, you have no idea how RFPs they send out second year, your costs are too high. What are our costs, or we're in trouble, those usual things. What are you going to do? Procurement people would tell me 99% of salespeople come back with discounts. Extend the contract, I'll give you a discount. Buy more, I'll give you a discount. Pay me, whatever. I said cost. So then I would come back, well, cost includes the price. We won't get to the sales pitch, but all these other. So having a response to that and being able to push back to customers, do you want a lower price or lower cost or more profit? Those are three different things. And last time, earnings per share are profit. They don't get the yeah, but, and then again, you've got to have something structured there to be able to go measure it and the like.
Yeah, I think the word that you used earlier in the conversation, which was a great word, is business case, right? If we can always bring it back to the business case, then it's, yeah, sure, total cost of ownership matters, but so does the return.
Yes. Yeah. And the believability and the probability. And where, I mean, I always say, I could put a business case to you, Mark, if I come to your house and do this and this and this, it's going to save you this much energy. You'll probably say, where have you done that? Where did that number come from? I don't believe that. My number is that. I mean, we're having a conversation, but I've got to start somewhere versus, what would it be worth to make your home more comfortable? Comfort's a nice thing to have, but how much am I paying for comfort?
Yep.
I'm a dollar and cents person. Yeah.
So am I. I'm trying to break out of that though, and trying to branch out a little bit.
but I'm willing to put, and I was just doing some work on less quantifiable things that you can start putting numbers to. And we do it all the time. How much more? Okay, this is a pricing thing. Depends where you are, where you're listening to this. But let's say your cell phone bill is $100 a month, and you get 99% coverage, and the customer service is 92%, whatever. Make up the numbers. Would you switch to somebody for $1? So a pricing professor asked me, I said, it's commodity. If you're going to say they're going to all deliver the exact same service, theoretically you should switch. The switching cost. I'm not going to pick up the phone and call Ma Bell or whoever it is these days and start changing around. So there is, when you're the winner, ease of doing business. Our engineers used to go to customers, and I would have an end user say, somebody's going to come in and do a discount. And I said, okay, we've been providing value. We measure this value that we bring for you, and I'm making numbers up, but we deliver $1.2 million of value per location per year. Yes, you've been doing that every year. Okay, if you leave our team and go to somebody else's team, how long will it take them to meet your people, walk the facility, learn your problems, understand your KPIs, build the trust, have a team together to prioritize how they're going to solve this? That sounds like a 6-month time frame for me. Okay, that's half the value year one gone. That's $600,000 out the door. And we used to get cherry picked because our sales team engineers would be, I hate to say, it's a horrible thing to say, too dumb, because they would give the customer the answers. I'm working on these 3 projects. So then the customer could take those and give them to your competitors. What we had to say is, look, have the bullets in your gun. Don't show them what they exactly are. So instead of saying relationship, I've got $600,000 of value improvements in play right now. You leave us, those stop.
Yep.
And the other 600,000 aren't going to happen. So you can start putting numbers on there and storytelling and saying, is it really worth changing for that?
Yep. Doesn't
always work, but
Todd, thank you for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
LinkedIn, Todd Snelgrove is probably the easiest, Todd Snelgrove Value, or my email address is todd@expertsinvalue.com.
Perfect. And to our listeners, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And finally, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, Mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.